Buddy, this is Jim Kurtz with Harvest Harmonics, and thank you so much for joining us again today on our Ask an Expert show. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Brad Roque, who is a consultant up in the Indiana Midwest region. He consults a number of farmers throughout the Midwest, and we're going to be discussing a number of different topics with him today, especially irrigation systems and how you can save time and energy, as well as money on water and different types of ways you can save on resources. So Brad, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate having you.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so Brad, tell us real quick, I know just in our conversations, you've been in agriculture for quite some time, I think 20 or 30 years at this point. What really made you kind of get started in agriculture, and what was your main desire for working in this industry?
That's a great question, Jim. Yeah, I've been in the industry now 20, 25 years. My uncle farmed growing up, but my dad worked at a Caterpillar, and so I thought I was going to be an engineer. In my senior year in high school, I hit calculus, and calculus and I did not get along. So I backed up, and I liked the farm, and I was able to get into a junior college, get some hands-on, some agronomy there, and then I went to University of Illinois to finish a 4-year degree. So I do agronomy work. So I like it in ag. A lot of opportunities out there.
Great. Yeah, you and I have similar paths in that regard, because I was an electrical engineering student in college, and I made it to about 3rd or 4th year calculus, and I had the same experience. Like, eventually I got to the point where I'm like, you know what, maybe I want to do something other than these complex mathematical equations for a career.
Yes, so. Absolutely.
So great. That's awesome. And so tell us a little bit more about yourself and your business, and how you're helping the farmers in the Midwest in your business.
Sure. Yeah, so we're in our 17th year of Agro Management Solutions. We started that back in 2004. Our goal is to help the farmers be more profitable. And our goal is to reduce inputs on a per acre basis. On a per bushel basis, not on a per acre basis. So you may spend more money per acre, but your yield goes up. If your yield goes up, you make more money, and everybody wins. So we do soil sampling, crop consulting, scouting. We do the sub drip irrigation, and the goal there is to be more efficient. So a lot of guys in our area have pivots. There's a great place for pivots. A lot of seed corn, a lot of tomatoes being raised in our area. So that works really well for them. But when it comes to drip irrigation, we are much more efficient than a pivot, and we can water the entire field. We don't have any corners, and we don't have any water going across the road. So we're about 20 or 30% more efficient.
That's great. And that leads me to my next question, because up in the Midwest, and most of the farmers we talk to, especially with corn and soybeans and the large crops, they're really looking at pivot irrigation to cover those large areas. And you were mentioning just now, we wanted to kind of get an idea, what is really the difference, not only in efficiency, but I guess overall production and those types of factors regarding pivot versus a sub irrigation.
Yes, I mean, like I said, we're more efficient, but on the yield side, our yields we can be 10 to 20 bushel better than a pivot, simply because we can spoon feed the crop quicker, even with a lot of rain. Those of you that are in the Midwest, we have gotten anywhere from 5 to 8 inches of rain here in the last week to 10 days. So a lot of the ground is saturated. I am on sand. So what we're doing right now is we can actually run about a tenth of water through our drip line, and as much fertilizer as we want in an hour window. So we don't have to run 1/2 inch. We don't have to run 3/4 of an inch or inch like some of the pivot guys do to get their irrigation, the water on in their fertilizer. So when we're wet, we can shine and just spoon feed that crop anytime that we want it, and very, very efficient.
Yeah, because the pivot guys, those guys, every time you run a pivot, they might spend, 500, 1,000, or even more, just in terms of running the pivot, let alone if they have to pay for any water costs. So, for sure, much more efficient. So, had a comment here. hello from Atlanta, best peaches in the world. So they're self-promoting their peaches there. But so in Indiana, like what kinds of crops are they typically growing? And obviously corn and soybeans. What other kind of crops do you typically see up there?
Yes, corn and soybeans are our main crops. We do a little wheat, little alfalfa. As we go north, we get into some fruit, some orchards or to our north in Michigan. But my main focus is corn and soybeans.
Corn and soybeans. Okay, good. And what specific issues are they running into as far as with corn and soybeans? Like what is there environmental issues, or is it insect problems, or what typically are a farmer looking to improve with the corn and soybeans up there?
Yeah, every year can be different. Up until last fall, corn and bean prices were extremely low. We've had a rally here in the last 6 months, and really has helped the market. Guys have a better outlook. But yeah, we're facing a fungus coming in. We've got insects that will come in. Right now, I know it sounds funny. It's Western bean cutworm that we're trapping, but it feeds on corn. So, and it can damage the ear. So we're trapping. If we have an issue, we're going to be spraying as needed. Another one is tar spot that came in the last couple of years. And again, guys will be spraying fungicide here in the next 1 to 2 weeks as we start to tassel.
Awesome. Yeah, that's usually when we talk to corn farmers, a lot of it's like they really pay attention around the tasseling time for that fungicide and those types of sprays. So,
well, we got a short window there, Jim. Yeah, if something gets to the plant at that point and eats the silks as it tassels, no silks equals no kernels, which means no ear, which means no crop. So, no crop means no.
Crop means you're in trouble if you're the farmer. So obviously you guys are very proactive about that. So one question I had from Lisa Charon, are you doing any soil testing with your farmers?
Yes, absolutely. That's kind of my main line of business between the drip irrigation and soil sampling. We'll soil sample spring and fall when the crop is off. A full range of pH, pK, organic matter, CEC, and then we turn around and write the fertilizer recommendations. We're not a fertilizer company. We don't. The only fertilizer we sell is the Conklin fertilizers. But we let every co-ops and the co-alliances in our area do the spreading.
Right. So now you mentioned in our conversation previously the GPS soil sampling. So can you briefly describe what is GPS soil sampling and how can that benefit the farmer?
Yes, we've moved to GPS soil sampling. Well, it's probably been 15, 20 years, and it's no different than in your car. If you want to go from point A to point B, I'm going from Northwest Indiana to Florida, and you say go, and GPS is going to take you there. And same concept here in soil sampling. We set the points based on GPS in the office, typically off of soil type, and we go to those points. So if you don't know where you're going, any road's going to take you there. But what we want is, if and I don't have a map behind me, if you have a certain spot in the field that's low in lime, we want to lime it. And the next spot is high. If the pH is good, there is no reason to lime. And we can save growers a lot of money on the fertilizer just by taking care of the pH. And once the pH is in line, all the other nutrients are more available, and it's a win-win. So you got to have your pH in line. You got to have a good soil test to know what's going. We recommend soil sampling every 2 to 3 years.
Right. So instead of just doing a soil sample and then just covering the whole field with all the same minerals and materials, this I would assume would allow you to pinpoint where you need certain minerals or certain fertilizers versus other areas which may need have different needs.
Absolutely. What we'll do is once we're done soil sampling, we'll make a GPS map that says, the northwest corner gets 1 ton, northeast corner gets 2 tons, southeast corner gets 3 tons, and southwest corner, for example, gets nothing. Sample by sample. So as the fertilizer truck goes across the field, the belt speeds up, slows down, and puts on the right amount.
Right. That makes total sense. And, with our technology with Kiminasi, what we're doing is we're helping smooth out a lot of those inconsistencies in the plant itself, so that it absorbs what it needs, whatever according to what's available. And so, obviously, with what you're doing to help balance out where those nutrients are applied, then it can definitely benefit the farmer for sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, what are some of the things that farmers can do to reduce? But obviously, you just mentioned GPS, soil sampling. But what are some other things that farmers can do to reduce their input costs or fertilizer usage?
Just be good stewards. Soil sample, and I think we're talking on this before we got on the call here, Jim. Spoon feed the crop. If for us, corn needs nitrogen this time of the year. It doesn't need it last year at the end of the season. So we don't do a fall application, do a pre-plant. Same thing, because we're sandy. Mm-hmm. Because nitrogen's not going to hold in the soil. So you spoon feed your crop. You put on nitrogen 2, 3, 4 times a year. You get the closer to tassels you get it, the bigger bang for the buck you're going to get. So yeah, we've got applicators running right now putting on more nitrogen. If you put all 180 or 200 units on up front, and then you get the 5-inch rain that we just got here in the last week, it's gone. The nitrogen leaches. And then some guys have issues with the EPA. But if you manage it, you do tissue tests and put the nutrients on when the plant needs it, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and one thing we've noticed with Kiminasi is that it helps keep that nitrogen in the root zone for longer. But you're right. I mean, if you're just dumping all of your nitrogen on the beginning of your season, most of that is going to be leaching out or running off during rain. So,
right. No, if you got a stabilizer, Jim, you're good, and that'll help some. But those only last maybe 15, 20, 30 days. Well, then after that, you're done, and you got a 60, 90, 120 day growing season, and you got to have nitrogen all the way to the end.
Exactly. So
crops are all the nutrients all the way to the end.
Right. So in your estimation, like let's say if a farmer was doing that, was just putting one application, how much of a difference in yield would that be versus doing it, let's say 3 or 4 times a year or 5 times a year, according to a better schedule?
It depends on the season. And up until recent, nitrogen was cheap. So farmer says, well, okay, I know I'm going to lose 10 or 20% of my nitrogen. I'll put on 10 or 20% more. So instead of doing 180 units, they may do 200 and 220 to make sure they're covered. Well, then you're still sending some nitrogen downstream if you get a big rain. So you're not being a good steward of the land.
Right, and down here they're having a huge problem in Florida with that, with algae blooms. And these algae blooms, they traced it back to all this fertilizer that just runs off into the waterways, and that becomes fertilizer for algae the way it would be for plants. And then now you have a red tide or something like that, which really is blooming a lot more often and a lot worse than ever before.
Right, and at that point, nobody wins.
Right. Yeah. So it's not benefiting the farmer because he's spending money on stuff that's not helping his crop. It's not benefiting everybody else because you have these things that are toxic to fish and humans and everything else.
Yes.
Cool. So I guess this is more of a generalized question, I guess, but how much of an impact can precision agriculture in general improve crop yields and improve profitability for most farms?
It can be huge, and you have to figure out your limiting factor. We've been talking nitrogen. If your limiting factor is not nitrogen, and for me, for years, it wasn't nitrogen, it was water. We're on sand, and when it burns up, you don't get the water. So our limiting factor was water. We put irrigation in 4 years ago, and we took our crops with an Edifim drip irrigation. We went from 75 bushel corn to 220 bushel corn, 35 bushel beans to 70, 80 bushel beans. We're on blow sand. So those of you that are in the Midwest and you're on sand and the crops are poor, what's your limiting factor? If it's water, if it's too much water, obviously you need tile. But then from there, is it nitrogen? Is it sulfur? Is it potash? Do you know? Do you have a tissue test? Do you have a soil test? And without those, you're guessing. Like you said earlier, Jim, if you go out and you blanket the whole field with all the nutrients, some spots are too high, some spots are too low, and you still have spots that aren't yielding. You got to figure out the why, and you got to figure out what's going. What is that limiting factor, and that is huge. Once you figure that out, then you take it to the next level and say, okay, what's my next limiting factor? So on our blow sand here, I still think we can reach 250, 300 bushel corn and 100 bushel beans. Last year with a yield monitor, we did see 300 bushel yield monitor for the first time, and it's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because a lot of farmers, at least when I talk to a lot of farmers, they're worried about the cost of various things. But sometimes when you really compare that to the benefit, like how much yield are you losing, that's a cost that they're not thinking with because, they're just not producing it. But if you look at, okay, I'm doing 75, 100, even 150, but you could be doing 200, 250, right. 300. I mean, how much is that worth to double your yield like that? I mean, there's almost not a price you can put on it. I mean,
it's huge. It goes back to what is your input cost per bushel, not per acre. And for myself out here, by putting the drip irrigation in, my payback on that is probably 4 or 5 years. And now that corn is $5, $6. It's less than that. Mm-hmm. So you got to look at the investment. You got to be good stewards of the land and manage what you have, and not be wasteful.
Right. And how important is it in terms of not just a particular farmer in terms of the next year or 2 years or 4 years, but obviously farming is unique in a lot of industries. It's a generational type of a business, right? A farmer will pass it on to his sons and then their sons, and it goes passed on generation to generation. So really, how important is it from not just a farmer's perspective, but for generational when they're passing these on to future generations?
Well, it's huge. And I know we were talking about the algae blooms and farmers putting on extra nitrogen. Most farmers, I should back up and clarify that, most farmers are good stewards of the land, that they take care of it for that exact reason. They've grown up on the farm. My neighbor to the west of me, they've been there 50 plus years. He says, why would I over fertilize with my well right here, with my family right here? Why would I have anything extra going into my well to contaminate it? He says, no, we want to take care of what we have. So from generation to generation, the family farm, from son to dad to grandpa to great grandpa, yeah, they want to take care of it, because if they don't, they're out of business. So we work with a lot of great farmers in the area. It's fun to work with them. They're always thinking. They're intelligent, asking good questions of what's next. Like you said, Jim, if you're raising 150, 180 bushel corn, how can we take that to 200, 220 economically?
Yeah, and do so without, like you said, without harming the environment or creating long-term problems. It's sort of a triangular challenge. Like you can increase one point, but if it's damaging the other two, then it's not the best solution possible.
Right.
Great. So, well, Brad, I really thank you for joining us. And I guess before we let you go, if people in the Indiana, Michigan, Midwest region, they want to contact you, they want to get a hold of you and possibly talk to you about some of these issues for their farm, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, best way is probably phone or text, 219-508-3955. Email, I check email frequent several times a day. Roki at agri-managementsolutions.com. If you got questions on soil sampling, you have questions on irrigation, especially the sub drip irrigation, you want an estimate on something, give me a call. We don't charge for estimates. We don't charge to come out the field to look at it, lay things out. And the guys that have put it in, the return they have seen, and the example I used, Jim, I'm not alone. We've had guys that have never grown 200 bushel corn, guys that have 100 bushel corn doing 250, 270 bushel corn. It's a lot of fun when you can take some land that's poor and turn it into ground that really produces. And with what we're doing and what you're doing, Jim, with Harvest Harmonics, I think we can make a win-win.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to working together on some of your farms up there. We definitely want to help them be good stewards of the land and help them, increase their production, sustainably, so that they can continue that production, not just get one good year out of it and then have an off year or something like that. To continue that sustainable good production so that we can continue to feed everybody healthily, and also take care of the land and make sure that they have something to leave for their kids and grandkids, etc.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So guys, again, contact Brad. We've given you his email and his phone number, especially if you're in the Midwest, up in his region. Definitely give him a call. This guy probably knows more about corn and soybeans than a lot of us will. You've probably forgotten more than most of us will remember, but he's definitely an expert in his field, and he can definitely help you increase your production and improve your profitability. And of course, if you're also able to utilize Kiminasi, then that's just going to be an even greater expansion of your business. So definitely give Brad a call. I'm sure he'd love to work with you in terms of improving your farm going forward. So Brad, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciated having you, and hopefully we'll be working together soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Jim.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Have a good day, guys, and we'll see you again next week. We will be doing an episode on the 5th of July, so definitely stay tuned for that, and we'll talk again next week. Have a good day, guys.